The last time I saw Daniel smile at me like a brother, I had exactly 48 hours left before my entire world would collapse. I didn't know it then. The champagne tasted expensive. The office overlooked the city we'd conquered together, and his hand on my shoulder felt like the solid anchor it had always been. Some betrayals announced themselves with warning signs. Mine arrived gift-wrapped in celebration, toasting a future that had already been stolen from me. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started, because you need to understand what we were before you can grasp the magnitude of what he destroyed. My name is Adrian Voss, and I'm a systems architect. That probably sounds dry to you, maybe even boring, but let me explain what that actually means. I design the invisible infrastructure that holds the digital world together. The networks, databases, security protocols, and data flows that companies depend on to exist. When a major corporation needs to process millions of transactions per second, or a hospital system needs to ensure patient data never fails, never leaks, never disappears, they call someone like me. I build the foundations that everyone else builds on top of. I met Daniel Carver in our sophomore year at Stanford. I was the scholarship kid from Sacramento, living off ramen and library coffee, working 3 part-time jobs to keep my head above water. Daniel came from old Boston money, not the flashy kind, but the kind where his family had a summer house that was actually an estate in Martha's Vineyard. But here's the thing about Daniel that caught me off guard. He never acted like it mattered. We ended up as lab partners for a brutal systems engineering course that had a 40% failure rate. The professor was this legendary hard-ass named Dr. Morrison, who took pleasure in destroying overconfident tech bros. First day of class, he assigned us partners randomly and gave us an impossible project: design a distributed computing system that could handle catastrophic node failures without losing data integrity. I looked at my assigned partner, this tall guy with expensive clothes and an easy smile, and figured I'd be carrying the weight alone. I was wrong. Daniel showed up to our first meeting with a whiteboard, 2 energy drinks, and a notebook already filled with preliminary system diagrams. "I've been thinking about Byzantine fault tolerance," he said, like that was a normal thing to obsess over. What if we approached it from a probabilistic angle instead of deterministic? We spent 8 hours in that study room that first night. Somewhere around hour 5, when we were both punch drunk from caffeine and breakthrough moments, he told me about his older brother who died in a car accident when Daniel was 16. He was supposed to take over the family business, Daniel said, staring at our equations. Commercial real estate, safe, boring, profitable. I was supposed to be the family's wild card. Go to college, explore, then eventually settle into something respectable. He looked at me then, and I saw something raw in his eyes. But he died, and suddenly I was the heir. And I realized I didn't want to spend my life managing properties and attending board meetings. I wanted to build something that mattered, something that was mine. I told him about my dad, who'd worked as a janitor for 30 years at a tech company, watching engineers come and go from their offices, always wondering what they were building. He died of a heart attack my senior year of a high school, 3 months before I got my acceptance to Stanford. "He never got to see me make it," I said. But he made it possible. Every extra shift he picked up, every time he fixed something broken instead of buying new, he was investing in this. That night, we became more than lab partners. We became brothers. We crushed that project. Dr. Morrison gave us the only A+ he'd awarded in 3 years. But more than that, we discovered we thought alike, not in that we agreed on everything, but in that our minds complemented each other perfectly. I was the detail-oriented one, obsessed with optimization and edge cases. Daniel was the big-picture strategist, always seeing how individual components fit into larger systems. Together, we were formidable. Junior year, we moved into a house off campus with 2 other guys from our program. Daniel's trust fund could have easily afforded a luxury apartment, but he insisted on splitting a rundown rental equally 4 ways. "I don't want to be the rich kid," he told me one night while we were fixing a leak in the kitchen sink. "I want to be the guy who earned everything he got." Senior year, during a marathon study session for our distributed systems final, Daniel pitched me the idea that would change everything. "What if we didn't get normal jobs?" he said, closing his laptop. "What if we started something?" I laughed. "With what capital? I've got about $800 and a laptop that overheats." "I've got capital," he said. "My trust fund fully vests when I turn 25. That's in 7 months, $2 million. He leaned forward, and I could see the fire in his eyes. "But I don't want to build something alone. I want a real partner, someone who'll call me out when I'm wrong, someone who cares about the work as much as the outcome, someone I trust completely." "Daniel, 50-50, he interrupted. "Equal partners, equal ownership, equal say. You bring the technical genius. I bring the capital and business development. We build the best systems architecture firm on the West Coast, then the country, then the world." I should have asked more questions. I should have gotten everything in writing. I should have protected myself. But when your best friend looks at you like you're the most important person in his world, when he offers you a chance to build something meaningful together, when he treats you like an equal despite the $2 million difference in your bank accounts, you say yes. We said yes. We spent the next 6 months planning. Daniel graduated summa cum laude. I was salutatorian. His family flew out for the ceremony. Old Boston money in tasteful navy and pearls, looking slightly uncomfortable in California sunshine. His mother hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for being such a good influence on him." His father shook my hand and said, "Daniel tells us you're quite brilliant. I hope this venture works out for you both." They had no idea we were serious. To them it was a phase, a quarter-life crisis before Daniel accepted his destiny managing the family portfolio. The day after graduation we signed the papers. Voss Car Systems, LLC. Our names merged together, equal partners in every sense. Daniel's lawyer, some family friend from his dad's country club, drew up the operating agreement. I remember sitting in that conference room, reading through pages of legal language I barely understood, and Daniel squeezing my shoulder. "It's standard stuff," he said. 50-50 ownership, equal voting rights, standard protections. My lawyer made it ironclad. I signed. I trusted him. We rented a small office in San Jose, barely more than a closet with 2 desks and a coffee maker that only worked half the time. Daniel insisted on equal salaries, $70,000 each, which felt like a fortune to me. The rest of the trust fund went into the business, equipment, software licenses, marketing, a runway to survive while we built our reputation. Those first 2 years were brutal. We worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. We lived on pizza and ambition. Daniel handled client acquisition and contracts while I architected the solutions. Our first big client was a mid-sized healthcare company that needed to overhaul their patient record system. The existing infrastructure was a disaster. Security, vulnerabilities everywhere, no redundancy, practically begging to fail catastrophically. I spent 3 months designing a system that would be bulletproof. Daniel negotiated a contract that was aggressive but fair. We delivered 6 weeks early and under budget. The CTO called us personally to say it was the best implementation his company had ever seen. Word spread. We took on bigger clients, financial services, e-commerce platforms. By the end of year 2, we'd outgrown our closet office and moved into a real space with actual conference rooms and employees. We hired our first team member, a brilliant young developer named Priya, who I'd TA'd for at Stanford. Then 2 more, then 5. By year 3, Voscar Systems employed 15 people and had annual revenue pushing $3 million. Daniel and I finally gave ourselves raises. We bought a house together in Palo Alto, not as an investment, but as roommates who'd rather live together than apart. We turned the garage into a home office and spent countless nights there, whiteboards covered in system diagrams, debating architecture decisions until dawn. The house had a pool, which neither of us ever used for swimming. Instead, we'd sit on the edge with our feet in the water, beers in hand, talking about everything and nothing, plans for the company, his latest disastrous date. My ongoing failure to maintain any kind of relationship while working 80-hour weeks, the future we were building. "You know what's crazy?" Daniel said one night during one of these sessions. It was late summer, year 4. The company had just signed a major contract with a national retail chain. "In 4 years, we've built something my family spent 3 generations building, and we did it our way." "Your family built generational wealth," I pointed out. "We've built a successful consulting firm. Different scales." "No," he shook his head. "They built money. We built something that matters. Every system you architect keeps hospitals running, keeps financial transactions secure, keeps real people's lives functioning. That matters more than any number in a bank account." I believed him. God, I believed every word. Year 5 was when everything started to accelerate. We landed a contract with a major tech company to architect their cloud infrastructure migration. The project was massive, 18 months, a team of 30, and a contract worth $8 million. It was the kind of signature project that would establish us as serious players in the industry. It was also when I met her. Elena Martinez was the client's VP of engineering. First meeting, she walked into our conference room wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my first car and an expression that said she'd already decided we were going to waste her time. She sat down, crossed her arms and said, "Convince me you're not going to fuck this up like the last 3 firms we hired." I loved her immediately. I walked her through our architectural approach for 3 hours. She asked brutal questions. She poked holes in every assumption. She made me defend every design decision. By the end, I was exhausted and exhilarated in a way I hadn't felt since my Stanford finals. She uncrossed her arms. "Okay," she said. "You might actually know what you're doing. Don't prove me wrong." The project was intense. Weekly status meetings, constant communication, late-night emergency calls when integration tests failed. Elena was demanding but fair. She expected excellence and didn't accept excuses, but she also recognized quality work when she saw it. 3 months into the project, we were troubleshooting a particularly nasty database synchronization issue at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. Everyone else had gone home. Elena and I were in our office, staring at logs when we finally found the bug, a race condition so subtle it only manifested under specific load patterns. "There," I said, pointing at the timestamp anomaly. "That's our ghost." Elena leaned in to look at my screen. She smelled like coffee and something floral. "You're kind of brilliant, you know that?" I turned to respond and found her face inches from mine. The moment stretched, professional boundaries wavered. "We should," I started. "Yeah," she said, not moving. "We should." Neither of us should add anything. We kissed in that office, surrounded by server logs and architectural diagrams, and it felt like every cliché and nothing like a cliché at the same time. We kept it quiet at first. Professional ethics dictated we shouldn't be involved while she was our client. But somehow, between status meetings and technical reviews, we fell into something real. She was brilliant and driven and didn't take any of my shit. When I got lost in technical perfection, she pulled me back to practical reality. When she got frustrated with organizational politics, I reminded her why the work mattered. 6 months into the project, 8 months into our relationship, I brought her to the house to meet Daniel properly. They'd interacted professionally, but this was different. This was my girlfriend meeting my best friend, my business partner, my brother, in everything but blood. Daniel opened the door with his trademark smile. "The legendary Elena Martinez," he said, shaking her hand. "Adrian talks about you constantly. I was starting to think you were a figment of his imagination." "Only when he's sleep-deprived," she said, "which is always." We had dinner on the patio. Daniel grilled while Elena and I made salad and argued about database normalization strategies. It was easy, comfortable, perfect. After Elena went to the bathroom, Daniel pulled me aside. "She's incredible," he said. "Don't fuck this up." "That's the plan," I said. "I mean it, Adrian. I've never seen you like this. She makes you happy. That matters more than any contract." Looking back now, I wonder if that's when he first started wanting what I had. Or maybe the seed was always there, dormant, waiting for the right conditions to grow into something poisonous. The cloud migration project finished ahead of schedule and under budget. Elena's company was thrilled. They immediately signed us for 2 more projects. Our reputation exploded. By year 6, Voscar Systems had 60 employees, offices in San Jose and Seattle, and annual revenue approaching $20 million. Daniel and I were each pulling in salaries that would have seemed impossible to our college selves. But more than the money, we'd built something we were proud of, something that mattered. Elena and I moved in together into a condo in Mountain View. It was the first time I'd lived apart from Daniel since college. The night before I moved out, we sat by the pool one last time. "End of an era," Daniel said, handing me a beer. "You say that like I'm dying," I said. "I'm moving 20 minutes away." "Still, Bachelor House is officially over." He paused. "You going to marry her?" I'd been thinking about it. More than thinking. I'd already looked at rings. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." "Good," Daniel said, and his smile seemed genuine. "You deserve to be happy, Adrian. You've earned it." 3 months later, I proposed. Elena said yes before I even finished the question. We set a date for the following spring. Small wedding, just family and close friends. Daniel would be my best man, obviously. Elena's sister would be her maid of honor. Everything was perfect. The company was thriving. I was engaged to an incredible woman. My best friend was by my side, sharing in all of it. I should have seen the cracks forming, the subtle shifts. But you don't look for poison when you're drinking from a fountain you've trusted your whole life. It started small. Daniel began staying late at the office more often. When I'd leave to have dinner with Eleanor, he'd wave me off with a smile and say he had client emails to handle. I thought he was being considerate, giving me space to build my relationship. Then he started taking more client meetings alone. "You're so busy with the technical work," he'd explain. "Let me handle the business development side. That's what we agreed on, right? You build, I sell." It made sense. We'd always divided responsibilities that way. And honestly, I preferred designing systems to schmoozing with executives. I trusted Daniel's judgment completely. Looking back, I can see how perfectly he orchestrated it, how methodically he positioned himself as the face of the company while I remained the invisible technical genius in the background. How carefully he cultivated relationships with our major clients, making himself indispensable, making sure they knew his name but not necessarily mine. But in the moment, I saw none of it. I was too busy being happy. The wedding was everything we wanted: intimate ceremony in Napa, reception in a vineyard, sunset over the hills. Daniel's toast was perfect. He talked about meeting me in that systems engineering class, about building something from nothing, about how Elena had made me complete in ways a business partnership never could. "To my best friend and his brilliant wife," he said, raising his glass. "May you build a life together as solid as the systems Adrian architects." Everyone laughed. Elena squeezed my hand under the table. Daniel met my eyes and smiled. 3 months after the wedding, Elena told me she was pregnant. I cried, actually cried, sitting in our bathroom holding the positive test, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it. I was going to be a father. This brilliant, incredible woman was going to have my child. Daniel opened a bottle of 25-year scotch to celebrate. "Uncle Daniel," he said, grinning, "I like the sound of that." "Godfather Daniel," I corrected, "if you're willing." His eyes got wet. Nothing would make me prouder. We toasted to the future, to my growing family, to the company's continued success, to the brotherhood that had carried us this far. 6 weeks later, I found the first real crack. I was working late, trying to finalize the architecture for a new client's data warehouse. Daniel had gone home hours ago, claiming a headache. My coffee had gone cold, and I headed to the break room for a fresh cup. That's when I noticed the light on in Daniel's office. He must have forgotten to turn it off, I thought. I walked over to flip the switch and save some electricity. That's when I saw his computer was still on, screen glowing in the darkness. I should have just turned everything off and left. I should have respected his privacy. But something on the screen caught my eye. Our company logo on what looked like a legal document. I stepped closer. It was a contract, a major contract with a financial services firm we'd been courting for months. $7 million over 2 years. I'd spent weeks designing the proposed system architecture, but something was wrong with the numbers. The contract listed the total value as $7 million, but the breakdown showed Voskhar Systems receiving only 3.5 million. The other 3.5 million was allocated to something called Carver Consulting Solutions, LLC. I sat down in Daniel's chair, my heart starting to pound. I opened his email knowing I was crossing a line, but unable to stop myself. There were dozens of messages about Carver Consulting Solutions, a company I'd never heard of, a company that, according to the incorporation documents I found buried in a folder on his desktop, Daniel had created 8 months ago, a company that he, and only he, owned. I kept digging, my hands shaking now. The pattern became clear. Over the past 8 months, Daniel had been systematically splitting contracts. Voskhar Systems would win the business based on my architectural designs, my technical expertise, my innovations. But then Daniel would structure the agreements so that half the revenue went to his private company. It was legal technically, the contracts were worded carefully, but it was a betrayal of our partnership agreement. Our operating agreement specified that any business related to systems architecture was company business. We'd signed that document 7 years ago, promising each other complete transparency and equal partnership. I found 23 contracts structured this way, nearly $15 million that should have been company revenue, our revenue split 50-50, instead funneled into Daniel's private pocket. My phone rang. Elena. I'd promised to be home by 9 for dinner with her parents. "Hey," I said, my voice sounding distant even to myself. "Adrian, you okay? You sound weird." "Yeah, no, I don't know. I found something at the office. Something bad." "How bad?" "I think Daniel's stealing from the company." Silence. Then, "Come home. We'll figure this out together." I drove home on autopilot, my mind racing. There had to be an explanation. Daniel wouldn't do this. We were brothers. We'd built this together. There had to be something I was missing, some context that would make this make sense. Elena took one look at me and cancelled dinner with her parents. We sat at our kitchen table, and I showed her everything I'd found on my phone, screenshots I'd taken of the contracts, the incorporation documents, the email chains. She was 5 months pregnant, her hand resting unconsciously on the curve of her belly as she scrolled through the evidence. When she finished, she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between pity and rage. "This isn't a misunderstanding," she said quietly. "This is systematic fraud." "But why?" My voice cracked. "We're partners, 50-50. If the company makes more money, he makes more money. Why would he do this?" "Because 50% of more isn't as good as 100% of half," she said. "Adrian, if he's been doing this for 8 months, and you've been architecting all these solutions, then he's been getting paid for your work. He's getting his 50% of what Voskhar makes, plus 100% of what Carver Consulting makes, and Carver Consulting only exists because of your designs." The math hit me like a physical blow. Daniel had been collecting roughly 75% of the value I created while I got 25%. For 8 months, while I was planning my wedding, while Eleanor was pregnant with our first child, while I called him my brother. "What do I do?" I asked. Eleanor reached across the table and took my hand. "First, you document everything. Tomorrow you talk to a lawyer, then you confront him." "But Adrian..." She squeezed my fingers hard. "You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this friendship is over." I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Elena, listening to her breathe, feeling our daughter kick against my hand on Elena's belly, and I tried to reconcile the Daniel I knew with the Daniel who would systematically steal from his best friend. By morning, I'd convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he'd made a mistake. Maybe his lawyer had structured things wrong, and he didn't realize. Maybe. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m. Daniel's car wasn't there yet. I went straight to our company attorney, a sharp woman named Janet, who we'd brought on full-time 2 years ago to handle our increasing legal needs. "Janet, I need to show you something," I said. "And I need you to tell me if it violates our operating agreement." I spent an hour walking her through everything I'd found. She listened, her expression growing darker with each new contract I showed her. Finally, she sat back in her chair. "Adrian, this is a clear violation of your partnership agreement. Any business related to your core competency belongs to the company. Daniel structured these contracts to personally profit from company opportunities. This is at minimum a breach of fiduciary duty. At worst, it's fraud." "What are my options?" "You could sue him personally. You could force him to return the money to the company. You could dissolve the partnership." She paused. "Or you could try to work it out privately first. But Adrian, you need to understand this wasn't a mistake. This took planning. Intentionality. He created a separate company, structured contracts carefully, maintained it for months. This wasn't an accident." Daniel arrived at 8:30, whistling, carrying 2 coffee cups from our favorite shop. He knocked on my office door with his elbow. "Morning, brought you a—" He stopped when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I didn't say anything. I just turned my monitor around so he could see the contract displayed there. The one splitting $7 million between Voscar and Carver Consulting. The color drained from his face. The coffee cups slipped from his fingers, spilling across my office floor. Neither of us moved to clean it up. "Adrian, how long?" My voice was cold, unrecognizable. "How long have you been stealing from me?" "I wasn't stealing. It's not like that. I can explain." "8 months," I said. "I found 23 contracts, $15 million that should have been ours, that should have been the company's, funneled into your private business. While I was getting married, while my wife was getting pregnant, while I called you my brother." "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," Daniel said, and something in his voice had changed. The easy charm was gone, replaced by something desperate and ugly. "My family expects things. There are standards I have to maintain. The company's salary isn't enough." "So you stole from me?" I stood up. "We're equal partners. If you needed more money, we could have discussed increased distributions. Instead, you created a shell company and stole my work." "Your work?" Now his face flushed with anger. "You think this company exists? Because of your precious architectures? I brought the capital, I bring the clients, I manage the business. You just draw diagrams and write documentation. Don't act like you built this alone." The words hit like a slap. 7 years of partnership, of brotherhood, reduced to this contempt. "Get out," I said, quietly. "Adrian, get out of my office. We'll let the lawyers handle this." He left. I sat down in my chair, staring at the spilled coffee spreading across my floor, and felt something fundamental break inside my chest. That night, I told Elena everything. She held me while I cried for the first time since my father died. Not just for the money, but for the friendship. for the brother I'd lost, for the future I'd imagined that had just been revealed as an illusion. "We'll get through this," Eleanor said, her hand on her belly. "All three of us. We'll get through this together." I filed a lawsuit 3 days later. Breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, violation of our operating agreement. I demanded the return of all diverted funds plus damages. I demanded a forced buyout of Daniel's shares at fair market value. Daniel countersued. He claimed the work was his as much as mine. He claimed I'd been secretly planning to push him out. He claimed 100 things that weren't true, building a narrative where I was the villain and he was the victim. The discovery process was brutal. Every email we'd ever sent, every document we'd ever created, examined by hostile lawyers looking for ammunition. Our friendship, our partnership, our brotherhood, all of it dissected and weaponized. The legal battle stretched on for months. Meanwhile, we still had to run the company together. Board meetings became war zones. Every decision required negotiation through lawyers. Clients started to notice the tension. Some contracts were lost. Employees began looking for other opportunities. Elena gave birth to our daughter, Sophie. In the middle of the worst of it, I took 1 week of paternity leave, then went back to fighting for the company we'd built, for the principle that you don't steal from your brother. Daniel didn't visit, didn't send a gift, didn't acknowledge her birth at all. The man who was supposed to be her godfather acted like she didn't exist. That's when I realized the full scope of what I'd lost. Not just a business partner, but family. The man who'd known me better than anyone, who I'd trusted with everything, had been revealed as someone I never really knew at all. The lawsuit finally settled 8 months after I filed it. Daniel agreed to return $12 million to the company, acknowledging through settlement, if not admission, that he'd stolen it. He also agreed to sell me his 50% stake in Voscar for $20 million to be paid over 5 years. I had to take out massive loans to finance the buyout. The company I'd helped build was now entirely mine, but I was drowning in debt and legal fees. $32 million to be precise. Monthly payments that would take everything the company generated just to service. But I owned it. Every share, every asset, every piece of intellectual property. Voscar was mine. Daniel walked away with $32 million over 5 years. He's returned $12 million plus the $20 million buyout. He'd stolen from me, betrayed me, and ended up wealthier than ever. The settlement included a non-disparagement clause, so I couldn't even tell people what he'd done. To the outside world, it was just a partnership dissolution. Happens all the time in business. I threw myself into work. 16-hour days became 18, then 20. Elena begged me to slow down, to spend time with her and Sophie, but I couldn't. Every dollar the company made went to debt service. Every new contract was a month closer to being free of him. At night, lying in bed while Elena slept and Sophie cried in her crib, I'd stare at the ceiling and replay every moment, looking for the signs I'd missed. The subtle tells that would have revealed what he really was. I think about that first night we met, staying up until dawn designing fault-tolerant systems. Had he been calculating even then? Measuring my value? Planning how to exploit it? I'd think about all those nights by the pool, sharing our dreams and fears. Had any of it been real? Or was I just a useful tool to him, someone to build the technical foundation, while he positioned himself to reap the rewards? I'd think about him standing at my wedding, toasting to my happiness, holding my daughter's godfather title like an honor, all while stealing from me, all while planning to take everything I'd built. The rage kept me going. It fueled those 20-hour days. It drove me to win contracts, to grow the company, to prove I didn't need him, that I'd never needed him. A year after the settlement, I paid off half the debt. 2 years and I was 70% clear. The company was thriving despite everything. Turns out I really had been the one creating value all along. But something had hollowed out inside me. Elena felt it. She'd tried to reach me, to pull me back to the life we were supposed to be building, but I was somewhere else. Somewhere cold and focused and consumed by the need to erase every trace of him from my life. "You're killing yourself," she said one night, after I'd missed Sophie's second birthday party because of a client emergency. "This obsession with the debt, with the company, with proving something, it's destroying us." "I'm providing for my family," I said. "No," she said, her eyes hard. "You're punishing yourself. And punishing us in the process." "Sophie doesn't know you. When she sees you, she looks confused, like you're a stranger who happens to live here sometimes." That should have woken me up, should have shocked me into changing. But I just worked harder. 3 years after the settlement, I made the final payment. $32 million, every cent paid. I owned Voscar outright, free and clear. The company was worth somewhere north of $60 million, employed over 100 people, and had become one of the most respected systems architecture firms on the West Coast. I should have felt victorious. I felt nothing. That night I came home to an empty house, a note on the kitchen counter in Elena's handwriting. "Adrian, I love you. I'll always love the man I fell in love with, the one who cared about building something meaningful, who lit up when he talked about elegant solutions to complex problems, who made me laugh and challenged me and saw me as an equal. But that man has been gone for 3 years. The man who lives here now is a ghost, haunted by betrayal, married to revenge that's already been served. You won. You got the company. You paid off the debt. You proved you didn't need him. But you lost us in the process. Sophie and I are staying with my sister for a while. You need to decide what kind of life you want to live, because this half-life you're existing in isn't working for any of us. I hope you find your way back. We'll be waiting. Love, Elena." I read the note 3 times. Then I walked through our house, the home we'd bought together, that I was never in anymore. Sophie's toys scattered in the living room, photos on the wall of the 3 of us, my smile looking increasingly forced and distant in the more recent ones. I'd won. I'd beaten Daniel. I'd proven he hadn't destroyed me, but he'd still taken everything that mattered. I sat on the floor of Sophie's empty bedroom, surrounded by her stuffed animals and princess nightlights, and I cried like I'd cried the night I found out about the theft. But this time I wasn't crying for a lost friendship. I was crying for the man I used to be, the one who believed in building something meaningful, who found joy in elegant solutions, who could be present with the people he loved. Daniel hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen my ability to trust, to be vulnerable, to be happy. And I'd let him. I'd chosen revenge over healing, proving something over living something. That realization should have been my turning point. Should have been the moment I called Elena, apologized, committed to changing, but it wasn't. Because as I sat there in my daughter's empty bedroom, another thought crystallized. Daniel had walked away wealthy. He'd stolen from me, betrayed me, and ended up richer for it. The settlement meant he couldn't be prosecuted. The non-disparagement clause meant I couldn't damage his reputation. He'd faced no real consequences beyond having to return stolen money and sell shares for fair market value. He'd burned down everything we built together and he'd been rewarded for it. That wasn't justice. That was just business, and I was the only one suffering for it. So I made a different decision that night, not the healthy one, not the one that would bring my family home and let me heal. I decided to really win. I spent the next week doing research, deep research, the kind that required calling in favors from contacts in finance, law, and corporate intelligence. I needed to understand Daniel's current situation, where his money was, what he was doing, what vulnerabilities existed. What I found was interesting. Daniel had taken his 32 million and tried to replicate what we'd built. He'd started another consulting firm, Carver Technologies. But without someone with my technical expertise, the work was mediocre. He'd hired competent people, but not brilliant ones. He'd won some contracts, but nothing major. More interesting, he'd invested heavily in a tech startup that was developing blockchain infrastructure for financial services. On paper, it looked promising. In reality, having actually examined their technical architecture through some creative corporate espionage, I could see it was fundamentally flawed. Their security model had holes you could drive a truck through. Their scalability approach would collapse under real-world load. They were maybe 18 months from catastrophic failure. But their marketing was excellent. They'd raised 80 million in venture funding. Daniel had invested 5 million of his own money and convinced several of his wealthy family friends to invest another 20 million through him. If the company succeeded, he'd multiply his investment several times over and establish himself as a player in the VC world. When it failed, and it would fail, inevitably, catastrophically, he'd lose everything he'd put in, plus face the wrath of family friends who'd trusted him with their money. I could just wait and let nature take its course. But that felt passive. And after everything he'd done, I wanted him to know. I wanted him to understand that his downfall wasn't random chance. It was me. So I became an architect of a different kind of system. First, I identified the startup's weaknesses. Then I made sure those weaknesses became impossible to ignore. I created a series of automated security audits through an anonymous third party that would stress test their infrastructure in ways that exposed every flaw. I ensured these audit results found their way to their major clients, not through any illegal means, just strategic placement of information where curious people would find it. Nothing I did was illegal. I didn't hack anything, didn't break any laws. I just made sure the truth about their technical failures became visible to anyone who cared to look. Their clients started pulling out. 3 months after I started my campaign, they'd lost 40% of their customer base. Their next funding round fell through. The company started death spiraling. But that wasn't enough. I wanted Daniel's reputation destroyed too. I reached out to every major client of Carver Technologies. Not directly, I'm not stupid, but through intermediaries, through casual conversations at industry conferences, through strategic recommendations, to companies I had relationships with. I made sure they knew that Voskhar systems could deliver better results, faster, cheaper. I didn't have to lie. I really could deliver better results. My team was better. My technical expertise was better. I just made sure people knew it. Carver Technologies lost 70% of its contracts within 6 months. Daniel had to lay off staff. His company, which had been moderately successful, was circling the drain. Then the blockchain startup declared bankruptcy. Daniel's $5 million was gone. The $20 million he'd convinced his family friends to invest was gone. I made sure the business press knew about it, made sure they understood he'd been the one championing the investment, convincing others to put their money in. His reputation in Boston social circles, the circles his family had been part of for generations, was destroyed. The Carver name, which had stood for sound business judgment and prudent investment for 100 years, was now associated with failed ventures and lost fortunes. I watched it all unfold from a distance, anonymous, untouchable. Every news story about Carver Technologies' decline, every mention of the failed blockchain investment, every whisper in industry circles about Daniel's poor judgment, it was all my work, my architecture of ruin, as carefully designed as any system I'd ever built. But I wasn't done. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you trusted, to have your future stolen by someone who smiled to your face while planning your destruction. So I reached out to his largest remaining client, a financial services firm that accounted for 60% of Carver Technologies' remaining revenue. I didn't pitch them Voskhar's services. Instead, I sent them an analysis of their current system architecture, an analysis that made it painfully clear that what Daniel was building for them was fundamentally flawed, would never scale, and would likely fail catastrophically within 2 years. The analysis was thorough, detailed, and completely accurate. I included recommendations for how they should actually architect their systems. I signed it a concerned industry expert. They fired Carver Technologies within a week. They hired Voskhar to rebuild everything from scratch. The contract was worth $12 million. Daniel called me for the first time in over 3 years. I almost didn't answer, but I wanted to hear his voice when he realized what I'd done. "Adrian," he said, and he sounded broken. "Was it you? The blockchain audits, the client losses, the everything. Was it you?" I could have lied, could have played innocent. Instead, I said, "Did you really think you could steal from me and walk away clean?" Silence. Then, "I returned the money. I sold you my shares. The settlement was justice, Daniel. This is consequences." Kept my voice cold, clinical. "You taught me an important lesson. Partnership, friendship, loyalty. They're all just illusions. What matters is power, control, the ability to destroy your enemies before they destroy you." "I was never your enemy," he said, and I could hear him crying, actually crying. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we were brothers, Adrian. That was real. I know I betrayed it, but it was real." "If it was real," I said, "you would have come to me when you needed money. You would have trusted me the way I trusted you. Instead, you stole from me for 8 months while pretending nothing was wrong, while standing up at my wedding, while celebrating my daughter's existence. You didn't make a mistake, Daniel. You made a choice, and every day for 8 months you chose to lie to my face." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I've lost everything. My company is failing. My reputation is destroyed. My family won't speak to me. I've lost everything. Good, I said. Now you know how it feels. I hung up. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated, victorious. Instead, I felt empty. I went home to the house that still felt empty without Elena and Sophie. I poured myself a drink, then another. Then I sat in the dark and realized what I'd become. I'd spent 3 years systematically destroying a man who'd once been my best friend. I'd used all my intelligence, all my resources, all my connections, not to build something meaningful, but to tear someone down, to prove that I could hurt him worse than he'd hurt me. And in the process, I'd driven away my wife and daughter. I'd become someone Elena wouldn't recognize, someone Sophie would grow up barely knowing. I'd won. I'd destroyed Daniel completely. His business was dead, his reputation ruined, his wealth evaporated, his family connections severed. But I destroyed myself too, just more slowly, more thoroughly. My phone rang. Elena. I heard, she said. No greeting, no preamble. I heard what you did to Daniel. It's all over the industry news. Don't, she cut me off. Don't explain. Don't justify. I just need to know one thing, Adrian. Was it worth it? I looked around my empty house, thought about my daughter who barely knew me, my wife who'd left because I couldn't let go of revenge, the hollow victory I'd spent 3 years orchestrating. No, I said, and the word broke something open inside me. No, it wasn't worth it. Then stop, Eleanor said. Stop punishing him. Stop punishing yourself. Stop letting what he did define who you are. Because right now you're not the man I married. You're not even a man I recognize. I don't know how to stop, I admitted. I don't know how to be anything other than this anymore. Then figure it out, she said, not unkindly. Because Sophie deserves a father who's present, who can teach her about building things instead of destroying them, who can show her what it means to let go of hurt and choose love instead. She hung up. I sat there for a long time, drink in hand, contemplating the ruins of my life. I'd beaten Daniel. I'd proven I didn't need him. I'd shown that betrayal had consequences, but none of it had healed the wound. None of it had brought back the man I used to be, the one who believed in building meaningful systems, who found joy in elegant solutions, who could be fully present with the people he loved. That man was gone. And Daniel wasn't the only one who'd killed him. I called my therapist, the one Elena had been begging me to see for 2 years, and made an appointment. Then I called my company's COO and told her I was taking a month off. First real vacation in 5 years. Then I did something I should have done 3 years ago. I wrote Daniel an email. Daniel, what you did was wrong. The theft, the betrayal, the systematic deception while pretending to be my brother, all of it was unforgivable. But what I just did to you wasn't justice. It was revenge, and revenge didn't heal anything. It didn't undo the betrayal. It didn't restore the friendship. It just created more destruction. I spent 3 years becoming someone I don't recognize, someone who uses their intelligence to hurt people instead of help them, someone who destroyed a man who was already paying for his mistakes. I don't forgive you. I may never forgive you, but I'm done letting what you did control who I am. This is the last communication you'll ever receive from me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for myself, for my wife and daughter, for the man I used to be and the one I'm trying to become again. What we built together was real. The friendship was real. You destroyed it, but I don't have to keep destroying myself in response. Goodbye, Daniel. Adrian, I sent it, then I blocked his number, his email, all of it. Not because I hated him, but because holding on to hate was killing me. The next morning, I drove to Elena's sister's house. Sophie answered the door, almost 3 years old now, looking at me with uncertain recognition. "Hi, sweetie," I said, kneeling down to her level. "I'm your daddy, and I've been gone for too long, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be here now, really here, not just sometimes, not just in between work, but really, truly here." She looked at Eleanor, who'd appeared behind her. Eleanor's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "Can I come home?" I asked. "Not to the house. I don't care about the house. Home to you, to both of you. Can I try to be the man you fell in love with again?" Elena studied my face for a long moment. The man I fell in love with believed in building things, not destroying them. He cared about elegant solutions. He wanted his work to matter. "I know," I said. "I lost him somewhere along the way, but I want to find him again. I want Sophie to know that version of me, the one who's worth knowing." "It won't be easy," Elena said. "You can't just flip a switch and undo 3 years of obsession and absence." "I know," I said, "but I'm willing to do the work. Therapy, present parenting, building a life that's about more than debt and revenge, whatever it takes." Sophie grabbed my hand with her tiny one. "Daddy fix things?" she asked. "Yeah, sweetie," I said, my voice cracking. "Daddy's gonna try to fix things." Eleanor opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. "Let's talk." That was 6 months ago. I'm in therapy twice a week. Some sessions are brutal, confronting the ways I let betrayal reshape my entire identity, recognizing how I used work as both weapon and shield, understanding that Daniel's betrayal doesn't excuse the ways I hurt my family. Other sessions are about rebuilding, learning to be present, finding joy in things that aren't revenge, remembering why I fell in love with systems architecture in the first place, not as a tool for destruction, but as a way to solve complex problems and build things that help people. I'm relearning how to be Sophie's father. We have breakfast together every morning. I read her stories at night. When she asks me what I do at work, I explain it in simple terms. Daddy helps computers talk to each other so hospitals can take care of sick people and banks can keep people's money safe. She doesn't need to know about betrayal and revenge. She needs a father who shows her how to build things, how to solve problems, how to care about work that matters. Elena and I are rebuilding too, slowly. She moved back home 3 months ago, but we're taking it day by day. Some nights we talk until dawn, processing everything that happened. Other nights we just exist together, watching mindless TV and being okay with silence. Last week we were sitting on our patio after Sophie went to bed. Eleanor reached over and took my hand. "You seem different," she said. "More like yourself, the real yourself." "I'm trying," I said. "Some days are easier than others, sometimes." I still catch myself spiraling, thinking about everything that happened, getting angry all over again. "That's normal," she said. "You went through something traumatic. You're allowed to still be processing it." "I heard Daniel's company went completely under," I said. "Bankruptcy filing. Everything's gone." "How do you feel about that?"
I thought about it honestly. Sad, I said finally. Not satisfied, not vindicated, just sad. We built something good together once, and we both destroyed it in different ways. Him through betrayal, me through revenge. There's no winners in that story. No, Elena agreed, but there can be survivors. People who learn and grow and choose different paths forward. I pulled her closer. Thank you, I said, for not giving up on me, for waiting while I found my way back. I love you, she said simply. The man I fell in love with is still in there. He just got lost for a while. Voscar Systems is still thriving, but I'm running it differently.
Now, I promoted my COO to CEO. Turns out I'm a better architect than executive, and I was burning myself out trying to be both. I focus on the technical work I love, on building systems that matter, on mentoring young engineers who remind me of who I used to be. I'm designing a healthcare interoperability platform that could revolutionize how hospitals share patient data. It's complex, challenging, meaningful work. The kind of thing that makes me remember why I fell in love with this field in the first place. Last month, Sophie drew a picture at preschool of our family. 3 stick figures holding hands, Mommy, Daddy and her. The teacher wrote at the bottom, "Sophie says her daddy builds things that help people." I have that picture on my desk now. Not the corner office I used to work from, but the smaller one I moved into when I stepped back from day-to-day operations. When I feel myself getting lost in old patterns, overwork, obsession, the temptation toward revenge.
Thinking, I look at that picture. Daddy builds things that help people. That's who I want to be. Not the man who destroyed his former friend, not the genius architect who could weaponize his intelligence, but the father, the husband, the engineer who uses his gifts to create instead of demolish. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from what Daniel did. Some betrayals cut too deep to completely recover from. But I'm learning that healing isn't about erasing the wound. It's about not letting the wound define everything you are. I still have moments of rage, times when I remember how completely he fooled me, how thoroughly he planned his betrayal, how little our friendship apparently meant to him. In those moments, I want to hurt him more, to make sure he never recovers, never rebuilds, never finds happiness. But then I think about what that revenge cost me. 3 years of my daughter's life I can never get back. My marriage nearly destroyed, my soul warped into something
Unrecognizable. Daniel already took enough from me. I won't let him take anything more. So I choose differently now. I choose to be present when Sophie shows me her latest drawing. I choose to have dinner with Elena and actually listen instead of mentally solving technical problems. I choose to mentor young engineers, not because it serves some strategic purpose, but because I remember what it was like to be that hungry kid from Sacramento who needed someone to believe in him. I choose to build instead of destroy. It's harder than revenge. Building always is. Revenge is satisfying in the moment, a quick hit of vindication and power. But it's empty calories. It doesn't nourish anything real. Building, a marriage, a relationship with your daughter, a career that means something, a life worth living, that's the hard work. That's what requires real strength. Yesterday I got an email from an old client, one I'd worked with back in the early Voscar days. They're facing a complex system integration challenge and asked if I'd consult. The problem is fascinating, exactly the kind of elegant puzzle I love solving. I said yes, Not because it would prove anything, not because it would serve some larger strategic purpose, but because I genuinely want to solve it, because the work itself matters. That's how I know I'm finding my way back, when the work is enough, when building something good is more satisfying than destroying something bad. I'll never be the naive kid I was in that Stanford systems engineering class, the one who trusted completely, who believed that partnership and brotherhood were unshakable. Daniel took that innocence from me, and it's gone forever. But maybe that's okay. Maybe I can be something better, someone who knows betrayal is possible but chooses to be vulnerable anyway. Someone who understands that revenge is easy but hollow. Someone who picks building over destruction, even when destruction would be simpler. Tonight I'll go home to my wife and daughter. We'll have dinner together. I'll help Sophie with her bath and read her 3 picture books instead of the contractually agreed upon one, because she'll ask for just one more, and I'll pretend to reluctantly agree like we both don't know this is our nightly ritual. After she's asleep, Elena and I will talk about our days. Really talk, not the surface level checking in we did when I was obsessed with revenge. She'll tell me about the engineering challenge she's working on. I'll tell her about the healthcare interoperability problem. We'll brainstorm solutions together the way we used to, back when falling in love felt effortless. Later, lying in bed, I might think about Daniel, wonder where he is, what he's doing, if he ever thinks about what we had and how we destroyed it, but I won't reach out, won't check on his status, won't dig for information about whether he's rebuilding or still suffering, because that's not my story anymore. My story is about the man who was betrayed by his best friend, who nearly lost himself in revenge, and who chose, painfully, slowly, imperfectly, to find his way back to the things that matter. My story is about a father who builds things that help people. And that, finally, is enough. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I still find myself thinking about that question Elena asked. Was it worth it? The revenge. The systematic destruction of Daniel's company, reputation, investments. The 3 years I spent proving I could hurt him worse than he hurt me. The answer is still no. It will always be no. Because revenge didn't give me back the friendship we had. It didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't heal the wound or restore the trust or bring back the brother I thought I had. All it did was make me into someone else, someone harder, colder, someone who valued victory over presence, proving a point over building a life. I destroyed Daniel, but I nearly destroyed myself in the process. See, no, the real victory, the only one that matters, is sitting at my kitchen table right now. Sophie is drawing another picture, tongue stuck out in concentration. Elena is reading the news on her tablet, occasionally showing me articles she thinks I'd find interesting. This is what Daniel couldn't take from me. This is what I almost gave up in my quest for revenge. This is what's worth building. My daughter looks up from her drawing. Daddy, what are you thinking about? I could tell her about betrayal and revenge, about systematic destruction and hollow victories, but she's 4 years old and she doesn't need that darkness yet. Instead, I say, I'm thinking about how lucky I am to have you and Mommy, to do work I love, to build things that help people. She smiles, satisfied with that answer, and returns to her drawing. Elena catches my eye across the table and mouths, "Proud of you?" I mouth back, "I love you." And for the first time in years, I mean it without reservation. without the shadow of revenge hanging over everything, without using my family as a shield against confronting what I'd become. I'm not the man I was before Daniel's betrayal. That innocent trust is gone forever. But I'm also not the man I was during my revenge, that cold calculator of destruction, that architect of ruin. I'm something in between, something harder but also softer, someone who knows the worst of what people can do but chooses to believe in the best anyway. Someone who understands that systems can be used to destroy but prefers to use them to build. Someone who learned, painfully and at great cost, that the only revenge worth having is living well, being present, choosing love over hate, building over destroying. Daniel took a lot from me, my trust, my innocence, my best friend, years of my life spent in obsessive revenge. But he didn't take everything. He didn't take my family, my talent, my ability to choose what kind of man I want to be. And in the end, that's the real victory. Not destroying him, but refusing to let his betrayal destroy me. That's the story I'll tell Sophie when she's old enough to understand. Not the details of business partnerships and financial theft and systematic revenge, but the core truth that when someone hurts you, you have a choice. You can hurt them back. You can spend years orchestrating their downfall, proving you're stronger, showing them they can't break you. Or you can build something better, something real, something that matters more than revenge ever could. I chose wrong for a long time, but I'm choosing right now. And every day I wake up and make that choice again. To be present, to build, to love, is a day I win. Not against Daniel, against the part of myself that wanted to become what he made me. That's enough. That will always be enough.